Bart's out next door and all the neighbors are fawning over him. He's such an attention magnet. There, that's a nice word. I was thinking something else, but it's quite the cat. It's just a plain sheet of melamine that you can get in the hobby section at the big box stores, and this piece is probably 15 years old and had a dozen or so small projects done on it. It's probably only got a couple more left in it. The other side's in pretty bad shape, but it's relatively cheap. It's flat, slippery as heck when you wax it up. So this is some of the glass that I intend to use to make up the backing plates, etc. And it's been sitting around for a long time. It's dusty. We'll blow it off, but it's all offcuts from the haul, so I can stack them and layer them, and it's not going to affect the outcome of the product. So I'm just going to continue on stacking pieces up till I think they're thick enough, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the project. So I'll put down 5 or 6 coats of this. Should be good enough. The parts I make will have a layer of peel ply on the bottom, which will make separating it from the platen or mold or work surface, whatever you want to call it, fairly easy. If I could find my plastic wedges, which too bad my buddy Roscoe isn't here. We could borrow his koala suit and polish the mold that way. That was funny. Flopping around in the bottom of his holes in his koala suit, buffing up his molds. That was a while ago. I do have more of the quadraxial stuff, but it's all very large sheets and I really don't want to cut it up. So that's going to be our stack. We're going to have one quad layer. We have 3 layers of 1708, thereabouts, pieced in the center, essentially as a core. And we'll infuse that tomorrow and see what we get. It should be good enough for backing plates. I mean, these aren't cosmetic parts, so I'm not too worried about what they look like. So we got 3 by 1708, and we have 1 by 28 ounce quad. And that'll make up our stack. So I just got to gather the rest of the stuff. I'll lay it all out. So I got my stack laid up. Just put it on the top layer of peel ply, trimming it so it doesn't interfere with my mastic tape, I hope. So I figure out of this stack about 2/3 of it will be usable. It will taper down on the sides, which will cut back on the amount of product that's left to be able to work with, so that's not too bad, especially considering these are just scraps. What are you doing, Junior? This is the flow media. This is just a plastic screen that will allow the resin to flow over the stack more easily. It's a little harder to work with. May actually have to tape this into position and trim it back a bit. Not exactly sure how I should feed the resin into a part this large. I've never done one flat panel this big before. About half this size we have. But I'm thinking if I allow the resin inlet to come from this end and work its way this forward towards the vacuum, you run the risk of the epoxy kicking off and not flowing through the stack before it gets up to the end. You'll notice that the flow media doesn't go all the way to the end, and really you want to get the resin to flow through the pack as quickly as you can and then slow down at the end, and the resin will still flow through the fiberglass and peel by, but this is sort of like a vacuum brake. Will slow it down so you don't end up sucking it all into your lines. I will use an inline trap, which will help prevent screwing up the lines as well, but I'm pretty much ready right now to put down our mastic tape and then our bag. Okay, here's our stack, our fiberglass, our peel plies, our flow medias, our intake manifold, our vacuum manifold, and our bag taped on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire up the vacuum pump. The pump itself is up there, and this is the Joe Woodworker EVS system, I think it's called, and this will automatically control the vacuum. So we'll see how it goes. Contact. So the pump's running. It started to draw a vacuum, but apparently we've got some leaks somewhere, so I'll just go around the whole perimeter, see if we can't find where we're losing vacuum. I have a suspicion it's this connection here, but I'll have to take a run around and look. Hold on. So after chasing leaks for about a half an hour, we're just a little over 25 inches of mercury, or 25 atmospheres. Seems to be going down ever very slowly, but that's good enough to pull apart. It just means that the pump will run a lot until we can find the leak. We'll find that leak once there's epoxy in the stack, and we'll be able to see air bubbles making their way into the bag. So I think I'm going to get ready to do the epoxy. I couldn't weigh my fiberglass before I laid it up in the stack because I couldn't find my electronic scales, but I know they're here somewhere. So there's the setup, and I'm just going to mix the epoxy and we'll get ready to infuse it. Stand by. So the epoxy I'm using is an ultra low viscosity vacuum infusion epoxy. This is stuff I've had for a couple of years. This is what we use to infuse our rudder. It should be all right. I know it will harden. It's just not. I have no idea what the shelf life is. Well, so actually it says 12 months at 77. But we'll give it a shot. Maybe a little over catalyze it. See if that helps. But yeah, there should be enough there to get it done. So we'll use 150 milliliters of the hardener and 450 of the resin. Take us up just over 600, and that should be enough, I think, to do this whole stack, but I can always mix more as we go along. So let's get started. It's getting warm in there too, so I don't know how fast this stuff will kick off, but I think it will take a while. We shall see. So let's go bit 450 of the resin. Go 150, maybe a little bit from hardener. And just like all epoxies, we'll stir it for 2 minutes, making sure we scrape the sides and the bottom of our pail. I can't tell you how many times I've done this, and a lot. I think the last time I counted, there was about 102 gallons of epoxy in the boat so far. A lot of that is me making mistakes and having to do things twice, and a lot of it has been sanded off and is on the ground in the boat shed. So that's how I get rid of my sins. You let me know when 2 minutes is up. I'm not counting. I think we've been about 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to take the mic off and fire up the pump. We'll give it a minute to draw down to about 26 inches, I think we got to. That's enough for an infusion. Just means the pump's going to run full time until we can actually find the leak, which we will see bubbles making their way into the airbag, so then we can stuff those up, and then it will pull a full vacuum for sure. See the resin starting to make its way into the stack now, just after a few seconds. Try and mark our progress at 1 minute intervals. It jumped out there pretty quick, covered about 1, 2, 3, almost 4 inches in the first minute. Now we're halfway through the second minute, and it's only come an inch, so that's the initial burst of speed. The vacuum's holding steady, so we're all good so far. We'll just let it chug away. I lost track of where we were, so I'm going to mark this as 12 o'clock right on. And it's going to take a while for the epoxy to move up, so there's a lot of bubbles coming out on the front. But seems to be going good so far. Fingers crossed. So once the resin gets to the end of the flow media, the front will slow down quite substantially, and we'll actually cut the resin off about 3 or 4 inches from the end. And what that should do is draw any excess epoxy that's already in the stack up into this system. So far I've used about 1.5 liters of epoxy, not quite double what I initially mixed, so I think we're going to have enough to get it done with what's in the pot right now. There are lots of bubbles coming through the laminate, and I'll throw a video up here close up to my iPhone where you can see them, but I don't think they're leaks. Vacuum's holding steady about 26.5 inches of mercury, so that's good. I suspect that any leak that I have is in this end somewhere. We seem to have resolved the one that was at the farther end. That was a major leak, but the little trap is ready for any overflow. So my SD card is full. Over there, let me down again. It's 128 gigabyte card, so I don't know what setting I have it on. But anyways, we've reached the end of the flow media, and it will slow down considerably from here. And again, I'll come back when I'm ready to cut the resin off, and we'll see how it goes. We're getting close to the end now. I don't think it's drawing in much epoxy. It's really warm in here, and the layup is really warm. I don't have one of those fancy temperature things, but it's got to be 85, 90 degrees in the shed here, so I think it's kicked off. We'll let it run for until I see bubbles in the feed line, and then I'll block it off. And we'll keep the vacuum on it for another little while and see how it goes. So that's it, just about an hour, and actually an hour and 11 minutes, and that's where it ended up. The epoxy is kicked, the bubbles aren't moving forward anymore, they're trapped in the flow media and the peel fly, and it's just 2 little corners I didn't get, and that's alright, I'll just trim those off. I only expect to use maybe about half, 2/3 of this, so there we go. Lunchtime.